This is Coach DeCarlo. We're talking about many mansions. And we'll be coming from John 14, verses 1 through 4. Jesus says this, "Let not your heart be troubled. You believe in God, believe also in me. In my Father's house there are many mansions. If it were not so, I would have told you. I go to prepare a place for you. If I go and prepare a place for you, I will come again and receive you to myself, that where I am, there you may be also. And where I go, you know, and the way you know." Now, what does this mean? A lot of times we just take this as a declaration that, once we die, Jesus is going ahead of us in heaven. And once we die, we're going to meet him up in heaven, and that's where we're going to go. This has a much deeper application. And as I often say, from Genesis to Revelation, this is your story. Now, my goal is to help you unfold the story in your own life so that it can become practical for you. So let's talk about this one. It says, "Let not your heart be troubled." Now, when we're talking about heart, we're not talking about that pumping device in your chest that circulates blood throughout your body. When the Bible speaks of the heart, it's speaking of the mind. Some would say even the subconscious mind. It says, "Let not your heart be troubled." Now, we're talking about trouble. This is like a churning of the ocean, when the ocean is churning back and forth and, there's that great uproar in the ocean. The scripture also calls this anxiety or distress. He says, listen, if you believe in God, believe also in me. Now, what's the significance of this? When we're talking about God, this is not one of the names of God like Elohim and Jehovah and Yahweh and so forth. This is the generic name for God. Some would say in Greek, theos. We can interpret it God's gift or the gift of God. So he says, if you believe in the gift of God, if you believe in the divine within you, known as God, the life force in you, known as God, believe also in me. Now, we solely look at the me as being Jesus. But the me that he's speaking of is the me within you, the I am, the self-existing one. So he says, listen, believe in God, believe also in me. Neville says this, quoting Blake, "Man's faith in God is measured in his confidence in himself." Recently, I was looking at a video and it was talking about this great rapper, Snoop Dogg. And, many times when people go up and they win awards, they say, "I want to bless the Lord, my Savior, Jesus Christ. I want to bless, Allah, Buddha, whomever that person's religious belief is." And Snoop Dogg said this. He says, "I want to thank me." Even as Jesus says, if you believe in God, believe also in me. Snoop Dogg understood that the I am within him looks like him. So he said, "I want to thank me." Now, some people would thought that was sacrilegious, blasphemy, that Snoop Dogg would say, "I want to thank me," as opposed to thanking God. But until you begin to have confidence in yourself, then your faith in God is going to be lacking. Because once you understand that I and Father are one, you're going to always look to a source outside of yourself. So many of us need to get to the place where Snoop Dogg is and say, "I want to thank me." This is not discounting the divine within you, because in you, he lives, he moves, he has this existence. And apart from him, you can do nothing. So the self-existing one known as God is also called I am. So if you believe in God, man's faith in God is measured in his confidence in himself. He says, "In my Father's house, there are many mansions." Father simply means the originator, the source of all things. So he says, "In my Father's house." Now, where is my Father's house? It says, "Know you not that you are the temple of the living God. Who's the temple? You are. Your body is the temple that resides the indwelling God. So in my Father's house, the origin, dwelling place. Now, again, when we're talking about house, this is dwelling. This is, again, like I said, know you not that you are the temples of the Most High God. Some would also look at mansions and they would say dwelling, but they would sadly be mistaken if they missed what mansions mean. Mansions mean to be, state. So in my Father's house, there are many states or dimensions. One dwelling house is location. Mansion is a state of being. So if you're operating from a state of happiness, joy, abundance, lack, loss, limitation, wisdom, wellness, wealth, whatever state that you're operating, that's your mansion. So in my Father's house, there are many mansions. He says, if it were not so, I would have told you so. He says, now I go and prepare a place for you. Let's talk about going in to prepare a place for us. This goes into the imagination. Now, what does this mean in applying this application to what it is that we do on a daily basis? The I am within us, known as us, called the Christ self, goes out and prepares a place. As Mr. Linder will often say, we're always thinking ahead of our evidence. Neville would often say, go to the end. So imagination goes to the end. He says, in these states, I prepare a place. What is it that you want to be, do, and have? As you get into your imagination of that thing that you want to be, do, and have, imagination goes before you, sees it as already done. Subconscious mind does not operate in the past. It only operates in the present. So when you're looking even in the future becomes now. He says, I go and prepare a place for you in imagination. And if I go and prepare a place for you, I will come again to current reality and receive you to myself. Now, he says, listen, if I go ahead in my imagination, if I go to the end and I see my desired as already being fulfilled, then the future becomes now, and we begin living now as though it's future. He says, and I will come again to current reality and receive you, the concept, the thing that you want to manifest in your life right now. See, when you begin seeing the thing as already done, imagination begins to take and shapes the world around you to bring about this thing in your current reality. He says, so if I go and prepare a place for you, if I see it in my mind's eye, if I advance to the future, even though currently I do not have it, he says, let the weak say that I am strong. The weak is calling out what he does not currently see in his reality, but he's affirming, he's decreeing, he's saying, I am strong. What is it that you want to decree in your life? What is it that you want to bring about in your life? You begin seeing that thing as real, even though currently in the current manifestation, or what we call the 3D, it does not appear to be so. You begin occupying it as so. There's a story that's told about Napoleon. And it's said that when Napoleon was a first lieutenant, he went to a counselor and he said, who do I need to become in order to be the general of the French army? And first and foremost, the person began to start with Napoleon's exterior. He focused on his walk, his talk, the way that he carried himself. And even though he was a little more than 5 foot tall, he walked as if he was someone that was 6'4". He walked as a general. And he also had a mind shift change. He had to begin acting as a general, even though he was only a first lieutenant. And in a matter of less than 2 years, Napoleon moved from a first lieutenant to the general of the French army. You too, creator, can live out your desired end. but you must begin to occupy it now. If I go in the future, like Michael J. Fox, Back to the Future, in my imagination, I will come back to current reality and receive you where I'm at in the future. Often I will speak to my future self, my older self, and say, who do I need to become today to get where I need to be? I see my obituary and I see the things that I need to have said about me, and I begin living from that state. I believe it was the psalmist that said, Lord, help us to number our days. You begin to live from the end. What kind of legacy do you want to leave behind? What type of person do you want to be spoken of when people look at you 100 years from now? What do you want to leave for your offspring, your children, and their children, and their children's children? When you begin to make these decisions from your current state of reality, you've moved into the future and you brought it back to now. If I go and prepare a place for you in my imagination through visualization and contemplation and embodying that thing, that person, that ideal, that belief, then I will come again to current reality and receive you to myself. I will begin living from that state now. Many of you, because you don't see the evidence, you get discouraged. But just because the exterior world has not caught up with your imagination does not mean to give up hope. It means to persevere. That where I am in imagination, in the future self, in the end, there you may be also. So it's just a matter of time before what you've imagined is embodied into what you call reality. He says, and where I go, you know. This is your desired end. Where do you want to be? Who do you want to be? Have an experience. When you decide that, that's the desired end. Where I go, you know. Without you directing it, your life is one of chaos, uncertainty. But when you begin to know who it is that you desire to be, and you begin living from that end, and you also know the way in your imagination, and where I go, you know. You must know your destination. Like I said, I recently took a trip to see Mr. Lindo. I had to get to the right airport. I had to have the right address. Speaking of right address, when I got to his residence, or the area of his residence, I had transposed the last 2 digits of his address, and I was at the wrong door. And so I called him on the phone and said, I'm here. And I waited for a few moments, and he didn't come to the door. Now, I thought that was strange because I had just told him that I was here. Oddly enough, something told me to turn around. I turned around, and Mr. Lindo was actually in the front of his home. The problem wasn't Mr. Lindo, it was me. I was at the wrong address. You have to give subconscious mind something to work with. Where I go, you know. You must know your desired end. Otherwise, how do you know that you're not already there? He says, and the way you know in imagination, as you begin to move in your knowing, all the world will acquiesce, take shape, form itself in the image and the likeness of the thing that you've imagined. And it cannot fail. But creators, you must live it so. You must live from the end. You must occupy that state until it becomes your reality. This is Coach DeCarlo. Only you can create your perfect world, not God or man. Only you can create your perfect world. And this is Coach DeCarlo saying, have a great and abundant day.